James Caldwell was the kind of man people admired. A self-made millionaire, he had built his fortune through years of hard work, smart investments, and an unshakable determination to succeed. He owned a thriving real estate empire, had a luxurious mansion in Los Angeles, and enjoyed the kind of wealth that many could only dream of. His life seemed perfect, at least on the surface. He was married to Catherine Caldwell, a woman who had been by his side since the early years of his success. She was elegant, intelligent, and respected in high society. Together they had 2 teenage children, a boy and a girl, who attended private schools and enjoyed the privileges that came with their family's status. To outsiders, the Caldwells were the embodiment of the American dream, a loving couple, a beautiful home, and financial security that guaranteed them a life of comfort. But beneath the polished exterior, James was a man restless with dissatisfaction. He was no longer the ambitious young entrepreneur who once dreamed of conquering the business world. Over time, he had become trapped in a routine that left him unfulfilled. The same board meetings, the same social gatherings, the same conversations with his wife about investments and future plans. It all felt predictable. Catherine, once his closest confidant, had become someone he barely recognized. Their marriage, though still intact, had lost its passion. Then came Olivia Reed. She was an airline hostess, young and full of life, with an energy that James found irresistible. He met her on a business trip to Miami when he was flying first class. Olivia had a presence that turned heads. A striking appearance, a confident smile, and a natural charm that made conversations effortless. She was nothing like the people in his world. She wasn't concerned with financial reports, corporate meetings, or the latest trends in high society. She lived in the moment, enjoying life with a carefree spirit that fascinated him. What started as harmless flirtation quickly escalated. James found excuses to travel more frequently, booking flights on routes where Olivia worked. Each interaction became more personal, each meeting more intense. Soon, he was sneaking away to meet her in different cities, indulging in expensive dinners and secret getaways. He bought her gifts, designer handbags, diamond jewelry, and even an apartment in the heart of Los Angeles, just a few miles from his own home. At first, James convinced himself that what he had with Olivia was just an escape, something temporary that would eventually fade. But the more time he spent with her, the more he felt alive again. She made him feel young, desirable, and important in a way he hadn't felt in years. Olivia, on the other hand, saw him as more than just a wealthy lover. She believed they had something real, something that could last. James thought he had mastered the art of keeping secrets. He was careful, always covering his tracks, making sure Catherine never had a reason to suspect anything. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and someone had already started watching him closely. Catherine Caldwell had always prided herself on being an observant woman. For years, she had been the perfect wife, supportive, elegant, and well aware of how to maintain the image of a flawless marriage. But something had changed. James was different. It wasn't just the late-night meetings or the frequent business trips. It was the way he looked at her, or rather the way he didn't. Conversations had become brief and distant. His phone was always locked, and he had started avoiding any real discussions about their future. At first, she ignored the nagging feeling that something was wrong. Every marriage had its ups and downs, she told herself. Maybe James was just stressed with work. But the signs were too obvious to dismiss. He had become secretive, too careful, too unavailable. The man who once planned romantic weekends was now coming home late without an explanation. He smelled of unfamiliar perfume, carried receipts from places they had never been together, and took business calls in hushed tones. Catherine wasn't a woman who acted on impulse. She needed proof before confronting him, and she needed to be sure. Hiring a private investigator was not an easy decision, but it was necessary. If James was betraying her, she had to know the truth. The investigator worked discreetly, trailing James during his business trips, checking financial records, and gathering any clues that could confirm Catherine's suspicions. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. Photographs arrived in a sealed envelope, James and another woman, laughing together at an upscale restaurant, walking hand in hand near an expensive apartment complex, sharing private moments that left no room for doubt. The woman was young, beautiful, and completely at ease with James. Hotel records showed he had booked suites for two. Bank statements revealed extravagant purchases, jewelry, clothing, luxury handbags. Catherine felt a sharp sting of betrayal as she flipped through the evidence. She sat alone in her bedroom that night, staring at the pictures, her hands trembling with anger. She had given everything to this marriage, stood by James through every struggle, and built a life with him only to be discarded for someone younger. But she wasn't just heartbroken. She was furious. Catherine wasn't the type of woman to suffer in silence. If James thought he could walk away from their marriage without consequences, he was mistaken. She met with a divorce attorney in secret, preparing to take legal action. With the evidence she had, she could demand a fortune in the settlement, take full custody of their children, and expose James for the man he truly was. But just when she was ready to confront him, something unexpected happened. Olivia Reed, the site, woman James had risked everything for, had started making demands of her own. She no longer wanted to be the hidden mistress. She wanted more: commitment, public acknowledgement, and a future as James's wife. And if she didn't get what she wanted, she was prepared to destroy everything. What had started as an affair was quickly spiraling into something much darker. The call came just after midnight. A panicked voice on the other end of the line reported a violent scene at an upscale apartment in downtown Los Angeles. When police arrived, the door was slightly open, the air thick with the metallic scent of blood. Inside, Olivia Reed lay motionless on the floor, her lifeless body surrounded by crimson stains. She had been stabbed multiple times, the attack brutal and frenzied. Detectives moved swiftly, searching for any sign of forced entry, but the apartment showed no signs of a break-in. The killer had either been let in willingly or had access to a key. Olivia's purse remained untouched on the kitchen counter, her jewelry still on her wrists. This was not a robbery. This was personal. As forensic teams worked the scene, one discovery stood out: fingerprints. James Caldwell's prints were found on the apartment door, on the wine glasses left on the table, and on Olivia's personal belongings. Security footage from the building's entrance showed James arriving just hours before her murder. Witnesses reported hearing an argument coming from Olivia's unit that evening, though no one had seen who left. James Caldwell was taken into custody the next morning. News of his arrest spread quickly, shocking both the business world and the elite social circles that once admired him. The image of a successful millionaire was replaced with that of a man accused of murder. As detectives questioned him, James denied any involvement. Yes, he had visited Olivia that evening, but he claimed he left long before she was killed. He insisted she was alive when he walked out the door, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His prints were everywhere. His presence at the scene was confirmed, and he had the strongest motive of all. Olivia had been threatening to expose their affair, pressuring him to leave his wife and start a new life with her. The prosecution argued that James, desperate to keep his reputation intact, had decided to silence her permanently. Catherine Caldwell, despite her personal betrayal, attended the initial court hearings, maintaining a composed and distant expression. The media swarmed her with questions, but she refused to comment. Though she had prepared for divorce, she had never imagined her husband would end up in handcuffs for murder. As investigators dug deeper, more unsettling details emerged. Olivia had confided in a close friend weeks before her death, saying she feared for her safety. She had been receiving anonymous threats, letters slipped under her door, messages left on her phone with no caller ID. Someone had wanted her gone. As the trial date approached, James's legal team scrambled to find a way to fight the charges. But with no other suspects and a mountain of circumstantial evidence, things looked bleak. James was facing life in prison. His entire empire, his fortune, and his family, everything he had built, was slipping through his fingers. But the case was far from over. Beneath the surface, something far more sinister was waiting to be uncovered. As the trial approached, prosecutors built a solid case against James Caldwell. His presence at Olivia Reed's apartment, his fingerprints, all over the crime scene, and the witness statements about the argument were enough to convince a jury. The media painted him as a wealthy man who believed he was untouchable, someone who had everything but still wanted more. The narrative was simple. James had an affair, Olivia had become a problem, and he had eliminated her to protect his reputation and fortune. His defense team argued that the case was circumstantial. There was no direct evidence linking him to the actual murder. No weapon found, no eyewitnesses to the killing. Yes, his fingerprints were everywhere. But that only proved he had been there, not that he had committed the crime. He maintained his innocence, but public opinion had already turned against him. Then came a break in the case. A forensic analyst, reviewing the crime scene photos again, noticed something unusual. While James's prints were found all over the apartment, the murder weapon, an 8-inch kitchen knife, had no fingerprints at all. It was wiped clean. If this had been a crime of passion, a sudden burst of rage, why would the killer take the time to wipe the weapon? Investigators revisited Olivia's phone records and discovered something chilling. In the weeks leading up to her murder, she had been receiving threatening messages from an unknown number. Some were vague warnings to stay away, while others were more direct, hinting that she would regret getting involved with James. Olivia had told a friend about the messages, but she hadn't taken them seriously at the time. A deeper investigation into James's life revealed something even more disturbing. Catherine Caldwell had not only discovered the affair, but she had also been secretly tracking Olivia. The private investigator she had hired to follow James had also gathered extensive information on Olivia, including her daily routine, her residence, and her work schedule. When confronted by police, Catherine denied any involvement in Olivia's death. She admitted to hiring the investigator but claimed it was only for her divorce case. However, surveillance footage from a parking garage near Olivia's apartment showed Catherine's car there on the night of the murder. It was the first real link between her and the crime. Detectives dug deeper into forensic evidence, and a new discovery was made. Fibers from a dark wool coat found at the crime scene matched a coat Catherine owned. With this new information, the case took a shocking turn. Catherine, who had appeared as the betrayed wife throughout the investigation, was now the prime suspect. Prosecutors re-evaluated their approach. The case against James was strong, but the emerging evidence suggested a different possibility. Had Catherine, consumed by rage and humiliation, taken matters into her own hands? Had she decided that ruining James financially wasn't enough? That Olivia had to pay the ultimate price? The courtroom was tense as new evidence was presented. The case that once seemed clear-cut was now unraveling, revealing a web of betrayal and deception far more twisted than anyone had imagined. The trial took an unexpected turn as Catherine Caldwell, once seen as the betrayed wife, found herself at the center of the investigation. Prosecutors amended their approach, shifting their focus from James to the possibility that Catherine had orchestrated the crime in a fit of jealousy and revenge. The evidence was compelling: her car near Olivia's apartment, her knowledge of the affair long before she claimed to have discovered it, and the threatening messages Olivia had received. But the most damning piece of evidence was the forensic match between fibers found at the crime scene and the coat Catherine owned. Catherine maintained her innocence. She insisted she had been home that night, that any evidence linking her to the crime was either a coincidence or an attempt to frame her. Her defense team argued that while she had every reason to hate Olivia, she had no history of violence and no reason to risk everything she had built. She was already preparing for divorce. Why commit murder when she was on the verge of winning a legal battle that would leave her with a fortune? The prosecution, however, had a different narrative. Catherine had been humiliated, betrayed not just by her husband, but by a woman she saw as an intruder in her life. The affair had not only threatened her marriage, but also her social standing. The humiliation of a high-profile divorce was one thing, but being replaced by a younger woman was something she couldn't tolerate. James took the stand as a key witness, a surreal moment for a man who had once been the primary suspect. He described how Catherine had confronted him days before Olivia's murder, furious and coldly calculating. She had warned him that he would regret everything, that he had destroyed their family, and that she would not let him walk away unscathed. He admitted he had feared what she might do but never imagined it would go this far. As the trial progressed, the jury was faced with a complex case. James had motive and opportunity, but the lack of physical evidence directly tying him to the murder made his conviction uncertain. Catherine, on the other hand, had a strong motive, circumstantial evidence linking her to the crime scene, and a clear reason to want Olivia gone. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Catherine Caldwell was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The once powerful socialite who had lived in luxury was now reduced to an inmate, her life shattered by the very betrayal she had sought to punish. James, though cleared of murder, did not walk away unscathed. His empire crumbled under legal fees and public disgrace. His children distanced themselves, unable to forgive the chain of events he had set in motion. The case became one of the most talked-about scandals in the country, a cautionary tale of betrayal, revenge, and the devastating consequences of secrets left to fester. In the end, no one truly won. Only the cold, bitter reality of a life destroyed by desire and vengeance remained.